Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Running Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah, and I'm so excited to be kicking off this series on Legacy Running Podcast, which is going to be the best core, back, glute, plyometric exercises that are actually helping my clients to get back into the demands of running or feel really confident after having their labral tear or hip dysplasia or hip impingement diagnosis. And if you're listening to this and you're like, Sarah, you sound disgusting. It's true. I have terrible allergies. I'm thinking maybe it's mixed with a little bit of a cold. So do bear with me as I maybe need like a nose break every now and then, right on cue. Or if you're just kind of grossed out by my voice, I'm literally so sorry. And just know that I'm here to deliver the best information and content possible. And I'm going to do it with the stuff he knows. So we're just going to work through that together. I don't know if you guys have noticed this on social media, but I feel like, maybe I notice this because I create content and like am trying to engage with people on social media. But I personally, like just in my personal life, feel so over like the information social media era. Like I'm just like, I don't need 3 tips to redecorate my house or 3 tips to make my Achilles stronger or whatever. Like I want to see like, what was the person like before and what were they like after? What were the steps that you took to get there? A great example that really just kind of pertains to where I'm at now is I currently am redecorating my house. Like we had our house remodeled, or we moved into a remodeled house in August of 2025, and we haven't really done anything. Like it's just really white, and yeah, there's like very few decorations or artwork or anything. So we want to do things that make it feel like our own. And I want to pick out timeless pieces. I want to pick out things that make it feel classy and exciting and like, you know, I live there and things that are pertinent and exciting to me. But like sometimes I feel like maybe the pieces that I like or the things that I'm drawn to are not necessarily like cohesive and timeless, or maybe I find a piece that is like crazy and exciting and all of the things. Like I want to know how to best pair it just to like make my house look warm and inviting and all of the things. And like I cannot social media it. Like I can't go on social media and look for design tips. Like it's too much. Like there's just too much noise. Even like AI is super crazy. The thing honestly that I like feel the most inspired by is like going back to the days of like, okay, I'm gonna drop some names here, like Studio McGee with Shay, I think it's Shay, or like Fixer Upper. Like I love how they're like bringing you into this like transformation that they're gonna do for their client, and they're like, okay, this is the, you know, McGee household. And like, this is the vibe that they want. Like they have lots of kids. So they want to be able to entertain. So they like walk you through like, okay, we're doing like these warm textures. So this room feels super inviting. And then we're doing a big area rug so that all of this extra seating feels really cohesive. Like you just learn those things and you're like, oh, like if I want to have this result, if I want my room to feel cohesive and inviting and warm, like these are some of the things that I can think about. And this is just like what I'm enjoying now. Like I'm just over the information. And honestly, like I noticed that a lot of my audience is too, which is why I wanted to bring you into this series of like, these are the exercises that worked best for my clients. And let me show you their transformation. Like, let me walk you through their ups and downs and what we went through together so that they could get to the place that they're at now. So today's episode is going to be all about the core. So the best core exercises that we could do to maintain hip health, even after we've been diagnosed with the hip dysplasia, labral tear, so on and so forth. And I'm actually going to have coinciding content with this on my Instagram. So I have a whole like Instagram post through this and TikTok and YouTube. And then this podcast is just going to be a little bit more in depth. So if you're an IG listener and you're here, welcome. If you're a podcast listener and you're going to IG or TikTok, like welcome also. But I'm really excited to kind of get into today's episode and talk about what worked for one of my clients best in terms of core exercises for her hip. So we're going to talk about my client, Sarah. Okay. We're just going to use Sarah as all these people's names because I actually don't feel like I've had some Sarahs, but this is one of my coaching clients and she was in my virtual Empower Hip program. This client came to me, actually like she had clear imaging findings on what her like imaging revealed, which we know literally I've had people who have had a full labral tear. The next time they get imaged, there is like no labral tear there. So she had clear imaging findings based off of her MRI, but it could be true or it could be like maybe just a false positive, false negative. So she had no findings on imaging, maybe a little bit of arthritis on her x-ray, but nothing on her MRI. So her main symptoms presented with like really tight hip flexors. Like she's like, my hip flexors are so tight and sore all the time. And then I get pinching in the front of my hips with like long bouts of sitting. And then as I like poked and prodded a little bit more, she's like, oh, actually, like, yeah, I do get some back pain from time to time. So when I kind of took her through like our movement screen of things that were pertinent to running, because that's what we were working towards, she was training for a couple of races. She like up trained for one race and started to get some pain. So she kind of like backed off of it. And then she started to train for another race a little bit harder, ran it. And then she actually had a lot more pain after. And that's kind of when things precipitated. She was like working with PT and then decided to work with my virtual program after PT just to get a little bit more specific insight into like her return to running. She was running a little bit, but she was afraid. Like she was like, I'm afraid if I just keep pushing it that it's going to get worse. So she was like, I just need some guidance on what to do. So she was running like, I don't know, maybe two days a week, but she was like scared about it. The biggest things that we found with her when I took her through like the specific movement screen, I should also mention like this gal is like a busy gal. Okay. So she is a working professional. She works actually multiple jobs and she's like has a really crazy, insane schedule. Like her schedule is not the same every week. And sometimes she has to work nights, sometimes she has to work days. Like it's just really crazy. And then she also has kids. So she has like very active children that are like involved in lots of sports and school. And like she's just doing all the things. So she's like figuring this out amongst the craziness of life. And the biggest things that we found with her is like when we kind of moved her back around a lot. So when I had her bend forwards and backwards and rotate and just see if she could like get to those range of motions, we were noticing that some of those things actually did bring on more pain into her back than she maybe once thought. So it was just notable that maybe like doing some back and specific core work might be helpful. When she was like getting into her squat, she was kind of offloading her her hip that was more painful. Then when she was doing some of her like single leg squats and jumps and all that stuff, I noticed that she just would land super upright. So she wouldn't have that like athletic position, that hinge, so on and so forth. Sometimes when we see that, we could see this is contributed by like a sway back posture, or like if you imagine like maybe someone standing with their hips kind of pushed forward. So their like pelvis is kind of pushed anteriorly. This is like her anatomy, like that is literally how she was created. So it's actually great that she operates in that. But as she's like doing some of these more athletic positions, I was like, oh, maybe we could train her into a little bit more of a hinge so that we're getting a little bit more glute activation and then she's not having so much stretching, maybe to like her hip flexors, and then maybe they'll feel a little bit less tight. She does have that kind of like sway back posture. So as we're working together, we started her off with things that would just kind of help with those specific things. So I am like literally looking at her program here. We started doing some like simple back extension, back rotation, help her get more in tune with like that hinge mechanics and be a little bit less upright. And then I also had her working on side plank clamshell, top leg straight to get a little bit like of that lateral glute as well as like the back and the core to kind of be functioning. I love that one because it's like I'm working my hip, I'm working my back, and I'm working with my glute in like it's not necessarily super functional because you're not always like laying on the ground, but it's a really like great way to load the hip and the back and the core with more weight than like a banded clamshell because I'm able to put my whole body weight through it. So I really like that one. So we continued on with these progressions for, oh gosh, I'm looking at her program like 6 weeks here. And then I remember with her, she was like, I'm feeling better. Like she was like, I'm feeling better. But she was like, and there was a little bit of like, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm making progress. And then she was able to run more. But once we got her up to, let's see, at this time, she was like 3, like 20 to 15 minute runs per week. She was like, I don't feel like I'm like making enough progress. And I was like, okay, that's like totally fine. Like, let's kind of deep dive in and see what's going on here. And as we were looking at her exercises, she had mentioned, or maybe I had mentioned, I don't remember. She was like, I was doing this ab exercise the other day and it actually just felt really good. Like it just felt really good onto my hip. And so we kind of took her through a couple different like core based exercise progressions. And she was like, yeah, this actually feels like really helpful. Like I'm really enjoying what's going on here. So, oh, actually, you know what it was? This is what we did. Okay, this is my real life brain thinking here. For her, she was doing that like back rotation exercise that was back rotation exercise that was like working on coordination and endurance. She specifically was a golfer. So I remember she was about to go on vacation with her family and she wanted to be able to golf. Like she hadn't done that yet. So I was like, let's do this specific like banded abdominal rotation. So if you imagine like if a band is anchored and then you're holding onto it and then you're like kind of twisting your trunk away from it. She did that to kind of, we did that to kind of like prepare for the demands of golfing. And she was like, this feels amazing. Like she was like, this feels really, really good. Like this is actually the most relief that we've had. And so started playing into that a little bit more, and I was like, dang, this is actually like one of like the biggest thing that's kind of like moving her symptoms along. So we actually played with that. I actually changed her from doing some of the other exercises to having two core specific exercises. So we did that like resisted trunk rotation, so the like banded abdominal rotation exercise that we were just talking about. And then I also had her do for her specifically a dead bug. So once we like got her into this like dead bug position, we realized that it was extremely challenging for her to keep her core in neutral as she was doing this position. She was like having so much extension through her back. She was having a really hard time when she would like extend her leg out, like keeping that back in neutral. And also, if she was able to keep her back in neutral and she was able to extend that leg out, she was like, oh my gosh, this is such a relieving hip flexor exercise. Like she's like, this actually feels like I'm getting a stretch through my hip flexor as I'm kind of going through this. So we kind of put her on this progression of doing like the resisted abdominal rotation as well as like a dead bug. And then as she was able to do these things, she was able to get a lot more progress and a lot more comfort in her hip flexors feeling less tight, as well as her not having as much pinching with sitting. And then we honestly just progressed these exercises. I progressed them with speed, and then I progressed her dead bug to include like more load going through her hip flexors while challenging her to maintain a neutral spine, to not only to like work her core, but to work on the stability into her low back and core. And as we got later into the program, those are the things that were like the most helpful for her. And then as we got later into the program, we started to add a little bit more like heavy lifting plyometric stuff into there, but we kept those like core elements in, like those core elements meaning like those two core exercises, because those are the things that were making her feel the most comfortable. So what I like about Sarah's story is that her programming wasn't just like this linear, like straight up, like skyrocketing progress, which I think is like we need to talk about this. We need to talk about that everyone's not just going to make this like phenomenal progress, like start like day 1 to week 12, just linear progress. Like we're going to have ups and downs, and that is extremely normal and common. And it's also extremely normal and common that like as we're progressing, we might be like, okay, this might be like a patience thing where it's like we need to stick with this, or it might be after someone's working with me for like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and if something's not necessarily progressing the way that we want, we're gonna reassess. Like we're gonna reassess, we're gonna not guess, we're gonna reassess, figure out what actually needs to kind of go down to make more progress, and start to tailor that programming to either what feels best or maybe that new assessment as we are working together. So next, I really want to take you through, I know that was like Sarah's journey and Sarah's story, but I kind of want to take you through some of like the core progressions that I like to use with my clients if they're like really, if we're really feeling like a core is a significant area of weakness that we need to work on with them. And I will preface this by saying like, when I'm thinking of the core, like I'm not just thinking of the abdominals, like the core to me is extremely all encompassing of like, I'm thinking of like the abdominals, I'm thinking of like even the back with it, I'm thinking of the pelvic floor, I'm thinking of the diaphragm. Like you could even think about like your breathing system encompassed with this. Like I really think the people that are like really great experts with this are people that are in the pelvic floor world. Like they really understand the core and the pelvic floor extremely well. So I feel like I have gaps in knowledge on this, but like these are just the progressions that I see that work for my clients. And if we're finding that the core is a significant weakness for somebody, like I might even refer out to a pelvic floor PT to be like, oh wow, like if you're having coding or if you're having a significant amount of leakage or whatever it is, like prolapse, all those things, like those are things that I'm referring out to a pelvic floor PT so that people are getting the most comprehensive like work that they need. And I've even done that in my program. I had a gal who, like, not randomly, but like she had a huge uptick in her leakage, and we actually referred out to a pelvic floor PT. She saw her for 2 sessions. My client was extremely rural. She had to drive to go see that PT. So we sure as heck like collaborated. Like, I told her everything that we're doing. This PT was able to see her for 2 visits, give her a great home program, and then she went back and we were able to continue to work together. So I love how it could be that seamless. But nonetheless, core exercise progression that I like to see with my clients. So number one is like, we just want to assess and understand what's going on. Like, for some people, it's like, I feel like I have a really weak core, and maybe that's true. Like, maybe they have like really great sequencing, but as they're going through like a plank or something, like they're like, this is extremely challenging. Or I don't know, like as they're going through, different like, or sit-ups and stuff, like this is extremely challenging for me. Like, endurance and strength can be one thing, but one of the first things that I'm thinking of is like, can you even sequence moves correctly? So for someone, I'm like, maybe they're doing a curl up, and as they're doing a curl up, maybe they're just like extremely like bulging through their core. Like, they're not really able to have like a nice segmental roll up, and they're just like having a lot of like bulging and bracing through their core. Or maybe we're seeing coning, or maybe we're seeing as they come up, maybe we're even like seeing some of their diastasis recti coming together. Other tests that I'll do is like, maybe I'll have them like kind of push their hands together, and we can just see how their core contracts. Like, you can even see the different segments of the core. I know for me on my right side where I have my hip labral tear, like when I do things like pushing my hands together, there's significantly less coordination on my right side compared to my left. Like, you actually can't see my abs like come together intense. Or maybe I'll have them like hold a band. So if a band is like coming from a different direction, I'll have them pull the band away from them, and we'll just kind of see how their core contracts as they're actually having to like utilize their core in that way. Or I'll have them be like laying on their back supine, and I'll have them lift one leg at a time, and then we'll just kind of see like, are they able to like maintain a neutral pelvis and their body on the table, or are they like completely rocking off? And then we kind of do some more sequential testing to see like, maybe is that core related, is that pelvic floor related, is that back related, all of that stuff. But basically, like, we really want to figure out, like, it's the same premise that I think about with the hip. It's like, do we have enough like coordination of things turning on right? Then do we have enough endurance? So like, if we're doing like a dead bug and their core is not sequencing right, okay, so can we do something that's going to allow you to sequence right? And then from there, can we do something to allow you to sequence right for a long period of time? And then from there, we're going to maybe add on strength exercises and even plyometrics. So let's just take this through an example of something like a dead bug, okay? So classic core exercise, you're laying on your back, your knees are up and your arms are up, and maybe you alternate one leg at a time, and then you alternate one arm at a time, like conversely and reciprocally, so that you are working on keeping the core nice and like flat, or keep like the back nice and flat on the ground. And then as you're extending your arm and leg, you're not like arching your back, and you're having to work some of your deep core muscles. Maybe I'm looking at someone like that, and they have an extremely hard time sequencing on the right side, or they have an extremely hard time sequencing on the left side. Okay, so let's start there. Like, let's maybe start with just bent knees. So like, your knees are bent, and then you're rocking your foot down, and then your arm is dropping back. Or maybe we're not doing, or maybe we're just doing arms, or maybe we're just doing knees. We're like getting in that nitty-gritty detail of like, what specifically is going to allow you to do this correctly and well. And then once we do that, once we figure out if it's improving your breathing, if it's like toning down the difficulty of the exercise, if it's getting one side to be more coordinated than the other, like, which we can do with bands or different like cues and all of those things. Like, once we figure that out, which I highly recommend to work with a PT for this, like, this is where I think people with the core specifically really go rogue, where they try to do all of these different things and they're not actually having an assessment that's terribly specific to them. And if core is one of your biggest issues, or if you think that that's one of your biggest issues, I really, really recommend working with a PT, because there's so many different nuances that can really make this go faster and allow you to really get the results that you want even faster with a quick assessment, or like with a thorough assessment to understand. So the first thing is just going to be learning how to sequence correctly. This could be with a dead bug. This could be in standing, doing like a Pallof press. Like, this could be doing like a side plank with like a specific cue. Like, I just think that like, I was actually just talking to someone about this where they're like, oh, I was really frustrated because I didn't know how to like turn on my transverse abdominis. And I'm like, yeah, that is frustrating. Like, I can't just sit here and be like, transverse abdominis turns on. Like, what I like to do with my clients is give them an actual cue of like, okay, push your hands together or push one hand into the table. Like, have something where it's not necessarily their brain is the one that's having to do it, but they're having like something else to focus on that's allowing that muscle to like turn on and feed forward. Working on the sequencing with these like simpler, easier muscle groups, like a dead bug or like a standing pull-off press, it's going to fire the deeper musculature. So in our core, like abdominal specifically, we have like our deeper, like postural tonic musculature that's always firing. These are the things that are like allowing us to sit for long periods of time, allowing us to not like leak when we pee. Like it's just like the deeper musculature that is in there. And then we have the thicker, it doesn't have to be thicker, but it typically is the thicker phasic musculature that sits over it. This is like our six-pack muscles that like when we're doing a plank, we're like really, really working hard. If we don't have the sequencing of these underlying muscles turned on really well, then we are not going to be able to perform best when we're doing stuff like a plank because it's just going to be these phasic muscles like trying to work really hard. And we might feel like we can gas out earlier because we don't have the sequencing down. So sequencing is first and foremost. And then from there, if we're doing something like a dead bug, okay, this is what we did with my client. So we did something like a dead bug. And then from there, we're like adding on the full gamut. Okay. So maybe I think she just started with her legs. So her legs were like extending out and she had a very hard time maintaining a neutral spine. So keeping her back on the table or like on the ground. So we just worked on that. Then from there, she got amazing with that. And then we added full arms, full, whatever, like full legs, all the whole gamut. And she was even like wanting to add bands and weight and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, that's totally fine. She's moved up to endurance. So now it's like she's got the sequencing down. She doesn't have back pain. She doesn't have hip pain with doing it. Feels really good with her hip flexor. Now, can you do this for a long period of time? Okay. Can you do it for a long period of time? So we're having her do it for like 3 sets of 20. She has these different things that are making it challenging and she's doing it at an endurance dosage. So like 3 sets of 20, she's working at like 6 to 7 out of 10 rate of perceived effort. And she's challenging the system to maintain the coordination for a long period of time. So she's working on those endurance dosages and she's feeling great with those things. Okay, here's where it gets kind of unique for the core specifically. Maybe I'm progressing her to something that is super isolated to the core, like a curl up, like an abdominal curl up or like a V up or something like that. And if we're looking at true strength training, we want it to be higher load, lower rep. So we want it to be something like, like 3 to 4 sets of like anywhere from 10 to 6 reps at like anywhere from 8 to 10 out of 10 RPE, rate of perceived effort. And it's really challenging to load the core in that capacity. And it's not super functional to like really, really heavy lift the core in that way because it's like main function is to be like that kind of endurance thing to allow us. It's like if you think of the core, you're like, oh, you want a strong core to be able to run for a long period of time, to be able to like kind of brace and then help you lift something correctly. Like you don't necessarily need it to like, it's not in the same way where it's like you need to be able to bicep curl something as strong as like you need to like do a curl up. So from here, this is where I start to think of our core as something that is helping us with strength training. So if I am working with someone, or let's like kind of use the same client, if she's like doing the planks and she's doing the dead bugs and those things are feeling really, really good for her. Okay. Then it's like, okay, let's incorporate some core work with your specific lift. So let's just make sure that as you're doing your bigger compound lifts and you're actually strength training, like you're doing lunges or barbell deadlifts or back squats or so on and so forth, you're actually learning, you kind of know the appropriate bracing strategy for your core, which again can kind of go back to some of that sequencing. Like if you have sequencing errors in your core, like I know for me that I do, there's kind of like a specific pre-bracing thing that I will do before I do heavier lifts, which I'm just kind of thinking about specifically like not pushing, but like gently engaging down and out through my lower abdominals and like kind of a little bit of like rotation through my hip and then kind of just like a gentle like tightening of my abdominals and then go ahead and like lifting of the heavier thing and like ensuring that my exhale is like kind of cued with the appropriate motion of lifting. That's specific for me. And those cues are things that work for me. If you're someone that's experiencing difficulty with like leakage or prolapse, or you feel like your core is super weak when you're lifting, like those specific sequences actually, again, could be amazingly worth it to go work with a pelvic floor PT, work with a core PT to really figure out what feels best to allow you to get those heavier lifts with the appropriate bracing techniques. So that is just kind of like another like plug for that, I suppose. And then same thing with plyometrics, like just ensuring that you, as you're doing your jumping and all of those things, like there's a little bit less like core specific cueing for that. But I think if you don't have the appropriate cueing strategies for your core, you don't have the appropriate sequencing and then endurance, at least at minimum, then plyometrics maybe don't feel as like seamless and easy for your core in general. So those are that like strength plyometric kind of veers off the normal path with the core, but I think it all kind of just blends back together of like, if you have that correct sequencing and that correct foundation, everything is going to flow really, really well with it. I didn't necessarily work on like bracing and like techniques with my client that had the hip flexor issues, but this is actually one unique thing that we did. So for her, we started with that sequencing with the dead bug, and then we kind of progressed her to more endurance dosages of the dead bug and even like some different levels of planking. And then what we actually found for her was that with the dead bug, she really enjoyed that lengthening of her hip flexor. So as her hip is like, or as her back is nice and neutral with the ground, as she's doing the dead bug and she's lengthening that hip flexor, she's getting a really great stretch to that hip flexor. And she's like, oh my gosh, this feels amazing. And I was like, you know what? I actually feel like you would really, really benefit from this like hip flexor eccentric reverse plank maneuver, which is almost like it's a really specific kind of exercise for the hip flexor to be lengthened and strengthened at the same time while working on the core. It's not like very unique, but there are just unique circumstances when I do this. And this is honestly where it comes, like my clinical brain comes in of like, oh, you actually might do really well with a specific strength exercise. And this is like a caveat, but I think it's just fun to share. So basically, if you imagine this, she's like on a bench, her like butt is on the bench. One of her feet is like hooked underneath a dumbbell, and then the other one is kind of, her other leg is like brought up to her chest. And then she's just kind of slowly leaning and then lengthening back. If you imagine this, what she's doing is she's just taking that hip flexor that is hooked underneath the like dumbbell, that leg, and she's lengthening that hip flexor. So she's rocking back, rocking back, rocking back, rocking back. And then what she's doing is she's trying to maintain a nice and neutral spine so that, because the hip flexor attaches onto the anterior part of like the mid spine, thoracic spine. And she's like keeping that nice and neutral. And like that anchor point is nice and static, but she's like kind of moving her whole trunk back. And then her other anchor point is nice and static. She's getting that eccentric lengthening of her hip flexor. If you imagine if my shoulder is nice and stable, and then my bicep or my elbow nice below is nice and stable, and then I slowly lower down that bicep curl weight, I'm getting a nice lengthening and strengthening of that bicep. And if it's like constantly just feeling really, really tight, that might be a really strong stimulus to allow it to get that stretch, but also have the control where she's not like irritating her back in that way. So that was like a unique kind of strength exercise that we did for her that worked really well. But I really wanted to like bring you in on this client's story and tell you that like the core is actually crazy. Like I would actually say like the core is probably just as complicated as like all of the different things that are going on at the hip, because you do have the diaphragm, the breathing, you have like the pelvic floor that is in there also, like you have the things below and above, like there's so many things that are kind of like working on or going on at the core. And yeah, I just think like 3 tips to like strengthen your core and 3 exercises to strengthen your core. Like it doesn't work. Like it doesn't work because like you don't have all of like the things that are specific to you. You don't have like the correct sequencing that's specific to you. You don't have the way to build it into the endurance. You don't necessarily know that like, I don't need to go like crazy with strength training into my core. Like I kind of just need to do that endurance training, but maybe I can have specific bracing techniques for my strength and plyometric activities. And then maybe there are these just really nuanced specific exercises that could be really like comfortable and helpful for my core. So I wanted to walk you through that and just kind of show you this client's story that like, I don't know, maybe where you relate, like maybe even in this moment, you could just be thinking, okay, like where do I relate? Like, do I have some like imbalances with my sequencing? Like, do I feel like my one side doesn't necessarily coordinate as fast as my other? Like, even just like kind of gently push your hands together and watch your abdominals in the mirror and see like, does it come into this nice, like kind of not folding in, but kind of like nice coming together pattern? Or is it really like, is one side not like functioning the same way as the other? Or do you feel weaker on one side than the other? Like, do you have those sequencing issues? Are you able, if you're able to sequence well, do you have good endurance with things like dead bugs or planks, or are you getting pain into your back or clicking into your hip? All these things. And if those things are true, I feel like those first two steps are amazing. And then like first strength, like if you just feel like, wow, my core just feels really challenged, like there's so much pressure, or I get leakage or anything like that, then maybe it is some of those bracing strategies that you need to work on. Or same thing with plyometrics. If those things are challenging for you, then maybe it's kind of going back to the drawing board with like coordination and sequencing and then endurance to allow you to get to that next step. But overall, I hope this episode was helpful. I hope it was enlightening. Some of the exercises that I did on my Instagram post, or I'll do on my Instagram post for the core series, are like some of these like specific things that I'll work on with my clients, or the specific things that I feel like are really helpful with my clients. So be for sure on the lookout for that. If you also are like, oh my gosh, I loved the way that like you figured out what was going on with that client, and the way that you were able to kind of just like step by step be like, this is working, this is working, this is working, this is no longer working. We're reassessing, pivoting. Okay, now finding something that's working, now finding something that's working, and then grow like exercise wise, and then growing the running capacity on the side. If you're like, I need that, I would love to work with you in the Empower Hip program. I have 4 spots open this April, and I just like find it so joyful to like get to work with clients one-on-one. So if that is you and you're interested, feel free to apply in the link in the show notes. There's a quick application. It's like 5 questions. Fill it out. It'll direct you to my free strategy call booking link. Let's hop in a call, see if it would be a good fit to work together in my virtual coaching program, or if you're local to Seattle, Washington, would love to see you in person for physical therapy. And then let's see if we can get you your results for comfortable running this summer.